Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is T.E.C. 3001. Couldn't tell you what it stands for. I could take a guess. Terribly evil canoe. It's a possibility. You never know. Might be buried beneath layer upon layer of subtext. Whatever the case, this is a game about running, and you are also a robot that likes to do so. For whatever reason. It's by a company called Phoenix Game Studios. This was actually released originally on Xbox Indie in 2011. It made its way to iOS very recently with a large addition of content, and once again to Steam with a few Steam-specific features like Steam leaderboards, as well as some trading cards and the kind of things that you would expect from Steam. Let's have a look at the options menu, shall we, and see what's going on with it. You can choose a metal robot or a wire robot. Wire robot is probably the better option because it does give you just a little bit of extra warning, a little bit of extra... What's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, situational awareness. That's 2 words. That would be why I was confused. You can also switch between third and first person. I cannot imagine what first person is going to be like, which is of course why we're going to have to try it. There is a multiplayer mode. Unfortunately, it is split screen local only. And it consists of 3 things: free run, speed run, and drag race. And the single-player campaign, which consists of just over 40 levels, is also based around the idea of those 3 different types of races, which each kind of have their own mechanics. There's also an endless running mode, alongside tracking for awards and score. So, let's show you exactly what's going on with it. I'm about 12 levels into this, as you can probably tell. Let us begin with the running. So, in this case, the objective is to collect 12 batteries. Now, in this mode, this is more of the... I guess you could probably describe it as a... Ow. As a mode that is a little bit similar to Audio Surf, where you switch between lanes. There is a free-running game mode, whereby you can actually move around and do all sorts of kind of crazy things, as a result of being able to have full control over your actual movement. As you probably noticed... It gets a little bit fast. Very fast, in fact. Almost to the point of causing me... I wouldn't call it motion sickness, but the amount of speed... I messed that one up completely. The amount of speed involved is a little bit crazy. No! Need to slide under those. So you have a number of different moves available. You can, of course, slide. You can jump. You can double jump. And you can also do an air dash. As well as a charge move. Can it just... Almost. Almost had that one. And you go a little bit quick sometimes. In this level, you have no control over your speed whatsoever. In other levels, there are some little gates as well as arrows that you can go through, which will... No. Don't want to dash there. Which will either slow you down or speed you up. So you can manipulate your speed to some degree. On other levels, you're actually very slow. And a lot of your speed will be gained through dashing and things like that. There's a... Just certainly an interesting way of doing things. Outside of that, a dash will also break glass. And you can do some pretty neat moves in midair. On some of the free running levels, you are able to do some pretty crazy stuff, which will allow you to kind of move outside of the barriers and then move back in simply through gaining so much momentum that you're able to fling yourself with wild abandon across the screen at extremely high speeds. Alright, well that was that. Okay, so there's a 3-star rating, which I somehow managed to achieve with only 6 deaths. I guess because I collected a lot of batteries. Alright, this one I think this one is more of the free running. Yeah, so this is the free running mode. You've got much more control over your character here, as you can probably see. And that's pretty cool because this is where you can pull off some of the coolest tricks and things like that. And as you might notice, the level design is actually surprisingly complex in places. You can do all sorts of crazy stuff, and it will let you do it. It doesn't stop you from doing it. You can actually pull off things that it's almost like the game wasn't designed to allow you to do, and yet you can pull it off anyway. It actually feels sort of like cheating in a way, which is great, because it gives you a really nice degree of freedom, and when you pull off one of those moves, you feel kind of awesome. Now, in this case, it seems like I could probably stay up if I did this right. So, if we go for a dash here, but no, it looks like I'm going to fall down to there, which is unfortunate. But you will notice that the level has multiple layers and paths that you can actually choose to go down. Can I make that dash? No way. No. Oh! I could have done that. I could have pulled that off. And that's actually the coolest part of this, because let's be honest, there's a lot of runners on the market, especially on mobile devices. The endless runner, things like Temple Run made the... That was stupid. Made the genre extremely popular. But in most of those, it's fairly limited as to what you can actually do. This game actually offers a fairly interesting degree of freedom, which allows for player creativity to really shine. And it's the design of the levels that allow you to do that, as well as the controls of the free-running mode, which give you the ability to do things like double jumps and some fairly ridiculous momentum-fueled air dashes. You can do cool stuff like that, and it feels great when you actually execute that stuff, which to me means that the game would probably be pretty good for those of you who have a bit of a knack for speed running. Now, in this case, I could do something really cool, which is jump outside the level entirely in order to try and avoid that gap right there, slide through there. There we go. It's actually asking me to slow down, so I should probably use that and not mess it up. And I don't know, there's just this little thrill when it comes to going outside of the bounds of the level, knowing that you're not on the track anymore and that you are just staying alive entirely due to your own momentum. And the game does have thrills. And I messed that up completely. It does have the thrills, and a lot of that comes from the feeling of speed. Where does the feeling of speed come from? Well, one, you move through the levels very quickly. Secondly, the visuals really contribute to that feeling of speed. I remember the first game that really made me feel like I was going incredibly fast. And I'm not just saying, like, fast, but really, really fast. And it was actually Need for Speed Underground, because it had an absolutely fantastic use of motion blur that really gave you that feeling of speed. Other games like Wipeout and things like that gave you a feeling of speed before, but not quite to that level. This game manages it simply through a combination of kind of blur and these really Tron-like visuals that work very, very well. There's also sudden increases and decreases in speed, which help a lot. And there's a turbo function. I messed that up completely. There's a turbo function on certain levels that you can build up as well, which will allow you to get a sudden burst of speed. What it does well. But I think it is the level design that impresses me the most. A lot of runners do not give you as many options as this game does for where you want to go. I can hop between these areas at will. I don't have to, but I want to. And the game lets me do that, and sometimes it rewards me for doing so as well. That area right there, flinging yourself kind of into the void. You've got to be very precise, of course. And I'm terrible at that, but fling yourself into the void, going into a sudden air dash, and it's really ripping your way through these levels is surprisingly enjoyable. Gives me a similar kind of thrill that a game like Race the Sun would. And this doesn't have the procedural generation, it's got handcrafted levels, but it kind of benefits from that because these handcrafted levels do give you the different options, and you do get that feeling of freedom. I don't think you get it in the drag racing levels, honestly. It's mostly the free-running stuff that gives you that, but the drag racing is useful for sort of breaking up the monotony. Because let's be honest, you know, it's a game about running. It's going to be a game about running regardless of what you do. So it is nice to have maybe a couple of different options, there you go, to shake things up just a little bit. They also like to change the visuals around every now and again and go through this kind of, they're called RGB gates, I believe, and they change the visual style of the level. I don't believe they have any influence on the mechanics. Certainly the tutorial never explained that if that were the case, but they're nice to look at nonetheless, and I like the effort to make that work. I love the way that the particles kind of fly at you as you're running. It really does give that feeling of speed. Nice visuals, honestly. You know, very Spartan, sort of very basic, but a lot of fun. Now, here's the drag racing. So, in drag racing, what you do is you start off going very, very slowly, and you gain a turbo function, and you've got to hit accelerate every time you hit one of these markers, and the closer you get to the middle, the faster you end up going. And you have a turbo to compensate if you mess up, which is kind of nice. But there's less platforming involved in that, and less of the precision jumping, and more of a case of build up maximum speed and get to the end of the level in time, otherwise you are horribly boned. Which is, again, a decent feeling, but it's definitely not as fun as the free running aspects. I'm also happy to say the price is kind of right for this one. I think that a game that comes out on Xbox Live Indie as well as iOS has this really big risk of being horribly overpriced on Steam. In my opinion, this game isn't. It costs $4, which I think is a reasonable price for a game like this. Seems like there'd be a good few hours of entertainment as well as some score attacking stuff if you guys are really into the leaderboards. And for the most part, it works really well. The controls are fine. They seem to do the job. You can get the level of precision that you need with the keyboard. It'll probably work pretty well with an analog stick as well, honestly. But I haven't found any problems with the keyboard. Obviously, there's a lot of tapping left and right. And I messed that up completely. Let's see if we can do better. There's a lot of tapping left and right that goes on just to kind of get that little bit of precision, particularly in the free-running mode that you would otherwise get from an analog stick. But it works. I obviously prefer to play racing games with an analog stick. That's just a thing. But those of you who are perhaps very much into titles like Trackmania are probably in a state where you can get over that idea and you're okay with it. Let's kick in a bit of turbo, shall we? I'm missing all of these points. It's terrible. There we go. It's a little bit of a turbo boost to get things going. What I also like about the controls is there is a real feeling of momentum. The way that you throw yourself forward, you don't feel light. You feel like you've got some real weight behind you, which means that once you get up to speed, and particularly when you pull off some really good maneuvers, it feels very satisfying. There's a degree of drag. The turns are actually quite sluggish, which sounds bad in theory, but actually it works really well when you're flinging yourself into the ether and getting a large amount of hang time. You want that feeling of weight because it really helps you feel like you've built up a huge amount of momentum. Alright, there we go. So overall, this is actually a really nicely designed title. It's very focused. It's one of those games where it's like, a lot of you will say, well, is that it? And I'll say yes, but what it does, which is limited, it does very, very well. And I don't really have all that many complaints about it, honestly. There's not really much you can object to in a game that has a very simple aim if it executes that aim well, and this game does execute that aim well. Executes it very well, in fact, as far as I'm concerned. I think that there may be a lack of content. I mean, you crack through the levels very quickly. There's about 42 levels and we're level 16 already. So, it is a few hours of entertainment at most, I would say, but it definitely gives you those thrills. It's helped along by a pretty solid soundtrack as well. Let me let you listen to a little bit of it as I race through here. Nice Wipeout vibe to it, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, it's got a pretty solid soundtrack. They also enhanced the number of tracks available for the iOS and the PC version as well, so there's just generally more content than the 2011 indie game release. So yeah, actually it's pretty fun, and the price is right, $4 for a few hours of entertainment. Would be nice to get some online multiplayer. I think the racing could be very fun indeed. What would also be nice is the ability to see ghosts of other players on runs. If you think of something like, say, Dust Force, where you're able to watch other people's replays, a function like that would be awesome, because I think you can pull off some incredible tricks in a game like this. Well, that was an idiotic thing to do. And it would definitely be nice to be able to watch other people do that, you know? I think that would give me a more enjoyment, I feel. But outside of that, pretty fun game about running as a robot. It's all it does. It's got really good level design with multiple paths. It's got some very satisfying movement and a real feeling of speed, thanks to some great animations as well as nice use of blur and particle effects. Yeah, it's very competent for what it is. And I would recommend it for those of you who think that you might be wanting to do a single-player running/racing title. It's good at what it is. So, well done to them. It's very nice. There was, of course, one last thing. I promised you first person, so let's have a look at that. This is what first person looks like on the Endless Run mode. which is kind of just zoomed in. It's a shame you don't see the arms or anything like that. Oh, you do see the arms. Cool. Only when you jump, though. That's not too bad. It would be nice if you could maybe look around with the mouse or whatever. But that's pretty cool. I don't think I would play it in this mode. I think maybe if you happen to be a Mirror's Edge fanatic, you might want to. And it is kind of cool, don't get me wrong, but I definitely think the third-person mode is the way to go. It's still kind of neat, though. Hopefully you can get a huge amount of speed eventually in this. This is on the endless run mode, so I assume you're kind of eventually building up speed. That's pretty cool. I like it. There you go. A little taste of the first-person mode for you. T.E.C. 3001, ladies and gentlemen. I still have no idea what that actually means. But it is available on Steam. I do know that much. Ah! God. Gets a little tricky, doesn't it? Let's slow down a little bit. Good lord, it's insanity. $4, or your regional equivalent. Not a hard sell, in my honest opinion. I'm still falling, aren't I? How unfortunate. Maybe even worth it for the soundtrack alone, I might say, if you're into this kind of music. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. And I will see you next time.